So, what are we talking about then? We were seeing ourselves in a million processes. If you get a body book, you'll see the billions of cells running around. You'll see what the immune system means. You'll see what an eye looks like from inside the place. And the book is telling you this eye is you, this skull is you, this is what you look like inside.
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm? So there are many yous, apparently, once you start to familiarize yourself with your own workings, which is usually ignored towards the pursuit of something. Discovery is in there in some way. And so that's why I'm saying a dumb thing like the getting a vaccination or not getting a vaccination introduces you to the processes of vaccination or non-vaccination in a way that doesn't disturb it, that you coming from religious feeling around it. What was the song they sang I just heard yesterday about one person alive and then it becomes 1,000 person? I think it was in communities when they all chipped in for one kid to be important in the world, and then he would come back and create 1,000 more like him or something like that. How are you doing, Derek?
Doing okay. Thanks, Danny.
So I think, can one perceive from the space of kind of a momentary being, you understand there's a story that you're in being played out. And you understand that there are frictions within the story that play out, but from the cameraman, it's obvious what's happening. You're just having the experience of one aspect of the experience that the cameraman or beyond the cameraman, the scriptwriter sees from the beginning. So the moment that you're in is also part of a creative process that's taking place. But for you, you're stuck in time. But the story is not in time, it's seemingly. And you see how many centuries of attempting to grasp a fluid life and a literal life simultaneously. And the punishments and pleasures of playing out heroically as an alternative life. I just saw Urja float in and out. Did you see that? Urja? Is the sound on okay?
She may have disconnected accidentally.
Yeah, she'll probably be right back, hopefully.
So when we have a moment and we see the normalcy of the situations that we're in, but then you also see each ache and pain, each experience, each the dialogue within oneself. You understand, and you see that that there are conferences and conversations not in our literal way, but through aches and pains sometimes, or shifts, or looks.
Mm-hmm.
Without the aches and pains, it's usually possessed by the owner, the body. But then it does seem that there's a point in the body where it lets you know that you don't possess it. It's also there with you. How are you doing, Urja?
All right, Danny.
All right, meaning what? Let me see. Well,
it's the heat is incredible. After 10 o'clock, it was impossible to be outside.
So let me look. One more year.
Yeah, one more year.
One more year of smoke, and now all of a sudden, my foot blew up again. Both of them. Relax. The other. And I'm watching it there, and it does seem like what they were talking about, it, where there is a over response of the immune system.
Mm,
It doesn't seem like there's any reason.
not your toenails?
No, but I'll show you how I'm walking barefoot. Oh. So from a fast walker, all of a sudden, that's ooh. And so first it was the second toe on each foot that just sent a shock up the system. And there's something that they call Morton's toe, which that is described that way, where the second toe is larger than the big toe. And that somehow when you wear shoes that are too tight, the big toe never works, so then so you get something called Morton's toe. So then you discover all these worlds that are in there. But I think what is happening for me and what is happening is a physical reaction to a small thing, an immune reaction. So I've been just looking out for it that way. What do you say, Erja? Do you have that at times? Where it looks like a big, fat feet. Looks like fat feet that are a bit red.
The heat make my feet swell.
And maybe that the heat and also the fire, the wood burning fire that's going on around us. Are you having that up there? Smoke?
Not yet, not right now.
Are they still having something like that in San Francisco? Smoke or that pollution?
No, it's been nice here.
You have a fire, Danny, in Santa Fe. Is there a fire there?
There's one 20 miles away, I think.
Oh,
Oh, that's
is it a bad one?
It's no, but they've had bad ones here, but these are sneaking up like 300 acres, 500 acres so far.
There's a big one in Arizona.
There's a big one in Arizona that is blowing here, and that's a really dangerous one. So it's really dry.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years, and let's see. So we're in the middle of happening here, and yet there's a process that's unfolding. It's obvious, but to be seen from 10 years later, what was really happening, and you see that your life was shifting, and this was happening, and that you see that much of life is left to chance. What it seems to the person chance because they're leading an orderly life, but that there's a moment hidden in the orderly life that shifts the plane somewhat. Is that worth hanging around for, then, Erja?
well, I finally let
You may outlive everyone. You look like you do have 146 in you. But let's say after 100, it's if you wish that they send you every week. Do you wish to carry on, or do you wish to leave the place nicely? And you say, yeah, it's okay. So seeing it from the dumb place, the life is a creative, not that I created it, but the I is only a factor in it. When you can say from the creative place, when you need the I factor, you can call it to carry out what the expression is. So it's somehow, I think that's what they try to capture in an art form, is where they're coming from the art point of view and then adopt a persona that expresses itself. But that the sound or the expression itself is a kind of sacred thing or holy thing because it's not available to the ego as a possessor.
Mm.
So then you say,
Yeah.
well, isn't that the transactions that happen in relationship, that there is an agreement? And they say, well, it doesn't, we would laugh our asses off if it was a handshake agreement. So agreement has many things. well, has agreeable in it. But it also has, when you have a life that somehow is really wanting a pure move, the premise of having a motive beforehand, where let's say I then operate an agency and we say, hey, you know, that woman over there would be a good career move for you. Would you like to be a good career move for somebody? Like they look for you online, they say, Urja, there's someone who thinks that you would be a very good career move for someone. Are you interested in? No. You'd rather meet the person in the elevator by accident.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say you recognize that there's something in you in relationship to the outer world that you are giving in what you're doing. And in those responding to you, there's a shared little perspiration or a tear or whatever that touches the other, and there's a familiarity, a friendship with it, and then creates a kind of factor within itself of possibilities created. Okay. And say you're in that atmosphere, and somehow the invitation to you has to come out of that atmosphere, not so much of the motive of the world, because you could see if someone kind of invites me into a situation because it's a good deal, if it ain't a good deal, I'm schmuck. You understand? I don't do so somehow they're seeing something that may be important to them or whatever, but like can't be incorporated into the story. Principally because I can't, it has to be true in some schmucky way. So let's say as there's attractions to you and distractions to you, there's motives inherent that somehow you can pick up on. Not as a flaw or anything else like that, but a future movement for you as you can see what looks like a future inherent in the form. And sometimes it's holy shit, is it? Because if it's going to be related to you or to us, it's going to have some truth in it. But it also has karma in it in a way that has, where you'd like to be able to start fresh from this, like almost as if it gave birth to a moment where the people receptively say, hey, baby, do you want to do this thing? The dumb mantra, where it's not so much based on logic or trips or making a buck or something, but the nature of the two people or the chemistry between them. So, is that too far-fetched when you then translate it into a literal world where, but something in you is in fact sniffing chemicals of the situation? I understand something in you is, your hair is processing a little bit of what is happening. So you are a whole character, and each part of you seems to be processing where you are, and you see what somehow you find a cooperation for the day in the body. And then sometimes the next says, you French bastard, what are you doing? Or something like that to you. It hurts so bad. So, and it denounces you that you caught it in France when you were a child. So, I know this sounds dumb, but I'm kind of describing living and dying in different perspectives of the form that one is in, of the body that one is in, where the objects then that are one is releasing is also indicative of a release happening in the life. So let's say you will somehow have the creative process, a creative perspective on a process.
Yeah.
And then you see why there was such a need to have a creative dialogue. Because as one fellow who had the PTSD, he said that an inner world was awakened after he found what he had done.
Mm.
And yet it was normal in their situation. If you would have reasoned with them at the time and said, come on, were you guys crazy? Where you can see that 30 years later or 20 years later, you're gonna, okay. But it was inherent in the moment, and you see the moment stretched out in time and space. And I say, okay, you come to that moment accidentally where you're still acting out this moment here in some way. As part of the psychological context of the society you're in, it continues. Whatever you are continues literally. But it also continues evocatively. As you make contact with the thing that you're afraid to make contact with in yourself,
Yeah.
you see that the fear factor was not stupid at all. There is something to see in the story that somehow one has been carrying on without. And it's not so literal. You're in the creative aspect of the thing. So let's say you get to see one's life just as if we went to the doctor and they said, okay, a year later, we'll see you. And you measure in your head, okay, a naive sense. But at that point, it's magical thinking, it's wishful thinking, but it in fact seems to be happening. Then there's rational thinking that we could add to it. It's not. So somehow we're in a space where it appears from that space, one has been given the life that they have. And that the person who owned that life left and moved and left us with this life, is the partner with this life, the situation. But it's from just being born sort of place. You start from the situation you're in as Urja in Boulder, Colorado. Would you be into it? If you didn't have to do literally Urja, but Urja, what they see you as.
Well, I'm becoming more and more invisible because I really let go of the garden, which I took care for 10 years. And I didn't know it was going to be so difficult, so painful.
So that doesn't seem to be so dumb. But some kind of pains are just indicative of, hey, girl, this is not for you. You have an idea of being a gardener now, and
Not anymore.
okay, so I don't know that you're going to get away with being a gardener now. So you can be the gardener now. You can do it, but not.
No, not anymore.
Although when I look at the gardens here, they're really working at them and
It's
keeping.
a lot of work.
We'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
What forms it takes, because as I say, that fellow came over here about the pot thing, and
Yeah.
they experiment more with plants, but then it becomes increasingly funny. So can one navigate through the systems that you're in? Let's say, At times, if I feel reluctance, then it's kind of illuminated. What is reluctance? It's not dominated by reluctance, but it's a question. There's a hidden question in the story that if you act on it, you'll meet in a few years. So we're not talking about a psychological state. We're talking about the person even discovering something in themselves. That somehow a true thing is somehow, even if it blows up, that it came from an honest place. Not a hang up, not to cure a hang up, not to solve issues or whatever, but it was a thing in itself. And in being a thing in itself, you start to see what pure means or holy means, or say it doesn't mean woo-woo and rules and regulations and punishments and so on. It kind of illuminates what your life is and where you're coming from into the story. So from a perspective of that, which resembles acting, one assumes the character that one is. Hope this doesn't sound too trite. Because who one is interfering and seeing something. So for you to portray what is in yourself, one can laugh at the systems and this and that and get around it. But hidden in that was a kind of breakthrough perceptively. That somehow, in experiencing the story from that perspective, it introduced a kind of sacred thread that laughs at being captured in any of these ideas about it.
Yeah.
But it does move through the literal system, but as soon as it's captured into literalness, then the literalness, you see the energy leave the literal form and laugh at you and leave you then with a new religion and a new organized form.
Oh,
But then once it's organized form, it starts to have motive again. And so just naturally, so it goes from a cooperative to a competitive, so, and one enters into the story. So you'd like to enter into the story primarily, almost every expression coming out of a couple of dear heart friends, talking soulfully and kidding around, and that somehow there's an element, a perfume, an electricity, an energy in the kind of, so you see relationship has meaning in that, because somehow it opens up doorways for you perceptively. There's like you get a chance to be seen from how you're seeing. You're talking to a mirror, I will say. And you say, well, my feeling is that, and they say, okay, but you are. If the person, okay, so you see that there's that dialogue that's going on in some way.
Yeah.
So even if I say, well, should I end it now? And the lungs say, sure, talk about ending it now. We were thinking that you were going to do 2 more years with Urgent. So let's say I then have a body that yells at me. If I give in to stupid tendencies, is that possible?
yes.
Then you have a whole van full of kids as your body that they're taking around with you. And all of it has kind of say about where do you want to go shopping? And they said, no, the leg doesn't want to go shopping or something like that. So it's a joke, but it's happening on a large, you do kind of need an agreement. Now you like not to be able to need an agreement, but that you see an agreement that's been happening already. And I think if you see the agreement that somehow is happening in the body, and caring for it, so then there's a few urjas, all coming together as urja, but all very separate characters. If the liver gets pissed off, it will let you know. The liver will let you know who you really are. And when the liver is in that state, he says, "Oh, you're going to talk about God, right? Go ahead." The liver knows. The liver has been listening to the story all along, and just waiting for that moment when you would finally recognize that something made you fall down and hurt yourself. Okay. But once it's in the picture, it lets you know in the crazy way the sadhana and the journey that you're on. So in some weird ways, it's almost, I've dreamt where my foot swelling up like this resembled getting a flat in Santa Cruz, outside of Santa Cruz. It was the same. It interrupted what was happening. You know what I mean? It was not a thing to be gotten rid of, but it was in fact part of the thing. So the premise is caring for it and try to see what's being said here. Is that too naive, Derek, or should we get on a motorcycle and get over to it?
No, I think that makes sense.
You know, when you go into the place with something like this where you don't know, you find out that even when we went in there, they didn't know either. And then they gave you tests. The woman who was supposed to know, they sent you for a blood test or heart test and inner bile test or something, where they radiate you and you're in this thing, and I'm kidding around talking to them, you know, while I'm being radiated, okay, to detect. And they found nothing then. So it's waving at me. One more year, I'll see you in a year. But if I look at it logically, probably the smoke in the air, the other things that are happening as natural, all contribute to that. I have been able to still do the exercises. Did you ever get those exercises there, Derek?
The ones that Mary took?
Yeah.
I did.
How are they? They're not finished enough, or they're too?
I mean, I think that we could make something out of it. It'd be nice to have another angle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe even a close up of your
That's
face.
what we were thinking. Well, what I was thinking actually more, I'm trying to do it with the shadow against the building. Because once you're in that, the shadow takes over. You don't know what I mean. There's an experience there once you're doing it, and especially if you're moving your eyes and you're smelling things and you hear the plane and you look for the plane, and so you coordinate and somehow the senses with the movement. But then once it's in the shadow takes it into a whole different place where you try to please the shadow. You move for the shadow, and it shows you don't have to do that many of this one. You can. So there was something in the shadow that was almost something it was like you were talking to yourself somehow. Okay. Is that too jerky sounding? But then I started to find certain movements. Like I would do a few years ago, I would purposely try to fall. And as I was falling, then all of a sudden you see movements come out of your body that are hidden in the body. So when you're falling, then you can. So you can't really practice it fully, but standing on the ledge and then bending over, you start to see elements awaken in you towards the happening. So you see systems in your body, and you see real systems that have been looking out for you. And you see somehow that this dopey thing would try to save this fool from falling over. It must love you in some weird way. Is this too dopey sounding? So you see this pursuit of something called love through time and space is inherently in the relationship to the body and the dialogue that's happening. And so something in that is also in you to find a dialogue with the outer. In relationship, this organization seems towards having the experience in the outer world. And somehow attractions bring you into the literal outer world. And as you enter into situations that were based on attraction or feelings or friendship or whatever, you see that it exists and it doesn't exist simultaneously. And so then you see the interesting creative challenge about having to take a vow in a circumstance that's in flux that way.
Mm.
Because it's really a creative process. It's not a literal process of continuity. It is around somehow a shared quality or whatever. So let's say that the one steps into dimensions that have been happening in their life all along without ever really fully knowing it when attempted to adopt a religious explanation or a psychological explanation. All of these things has relevance, but somehow the energy that constituted you through the story was in flux. It moved through time. Its story was not in time. So let's say you detect a thread of you through a memory, and you see that memory thread run through the story to the present. And you start to see parallel situations that have affected the story that you're in as it literalized very deeply. You meet yourself. So as you meet yourself in that way, you're not meeting a self as a possessive, but you're meeting a self that has been more like the orchestra play or the director or someone like that who saw a larger picture and saw each occasion being an expression within an expression. And that one accessed that experience in retrospect and memory because it was no longer attempting to appropriate it or possess it or anything like that. It saw its life as the aspect of its life being survival oriented, but then the inner life coming from a different place. When the survival orientation took over, it lost the depth of itself to some degree, but it couldn't be ignored. So somehow from the creative perspective, it had to be creatively integrated into the situation. Does that make sense at all, Derek?
Yeah.
That the usual negotiation in the world around doing something, when it comes from the schmuckhood of falling in love, what they call, but not literally falling in, you see somehow there's something in your being that sees an honest affection and a being there, and you see the honesty of it. And somehow the honesty of it changes the picture in relationship to it. That honesty is able to move through the world and assume characters and be a friend and this and that. But that honesty is also the attraction that brought me and brings me into a literal situation. So I'm explaining how it's coming to me. And so therefore it's giving me the perspective that all of the life has had its theater in it. And it is, and time and space is somehow fluid in that thing, not as a possessive, but time and space is actually happening. Just as they say in the world now, all these things out there are actually happening. But what's happening for you is it's very hot and your neck hurts, and what's happening for you is the rent money. Okay, not only to dumb it down, there is somehow a perspective of what happens in the whole of it, in the totality of it. But you see, your day to day is almost a fully creative act. And you see to what extent you keep yourself informed of an outer picture. So what do you say, Derek? It's not a question of doing. I think it's the seeing itself creates its own environment.
Seems the doing, when it comes to doing, it's almost a natural outcropping.
If you love someone, getting a job to help them out is not a dumb thing.
Mhm.
Even though if someone logically said to you, the account says, yeah, this is a very dumb thing that you're doing here. You know, you have to agree from his perspective, it is a dumb thing because you're kind of hiding. You're hiding something that is a dumb thing in the world, but is a thing that's really desired in the deeper world, is that there's an I and thou happening. So somehow dumb things are one aspect of it. But there's another aspect of it where you see the creative dimensions that are happening. And as they've come into your life especially. So somehow the parameters of how it comes into your life has some importance because there's levels of desire, will, hopes, you know, the whole caravan of movements going that relationship brings. So generally, when it's thought to be accidental, oh, excuse me, or how are you, or something like that, that it started from that moment. But then you also see, no, there was an intent in going to that place to have that moment. And you see then that rehearsal that they had before they got to the bar, before they got to the other, okay, was brought into the story. And you see a whole world of genes and passages and just happening in a situation that's normal in the world. But for us, what's called normal out there is like we're watching a movie or something. You know, that's the movies seem to be more accurate than the literal reality. So as one visits these parallel worlds from the creative perspective, they bring some element of that into the literal world. And that world that is changed a little bit by the creative perspective of what's happening is kind of growing up to become creative people. So let's say, how would we describe it when it's in flux? Situation comedy. You know what? Which one? It's the one with the woman and her daughters, and she's in show business or whatever. But that helped a friend here who has 4 or 5 kids there, and so she could see all the arguments that the woman is having with the kids, raising the kids, you know, and heavy it was. And, you know. Do you remember it, Derek?
It's good. Was it the word good in there? Good place or good?
No.
But I do. I do. She's a voiceover the mom was a voiceover actor, and
Yeah.
Um, anything else happening, or should we still do stream of consciousness floating over the field?
seems like that isn't the stream of consciousness. I mean, whether we should do anything else within the stream of consciousness, kind of.
It's not that we should do. It's you're free. You discover a freedom that doesn't mean licensed behavior. It means the freedom of someone who somehow discovers that they're in an artwork of some sort, and they're looking out for that. So in looking out for that, there's somehow an instinct in them that is looking out for a true thing. And if it has to compromise from the true thing, it's measuring that. And I say, why? Because somehow in the dialogue that's happening, there's a promise. And as you meet people in that conversation, even in the goofy days or whatever, there is a thread that runs through that. I think that is religious without religion, that there is a nuance when it's lost and when it's not. So there are, hidden in the story is a full heart, a broken heart. Now the premise was of the broken heart in some scriptures that I read there, that the dying, whether one lived or died together with the mate or together or whatever, but that there was some dimension in that. But let's say you start to see a world where dying and living are happening. And in the medical world, it's appropriated that there's reasons for dying. And they would never give you a reason that the liver is pissed off with the lung because the lungs didn't treat it right. And I said, holy shit, relationship is happening inside the body. They're pissed off with each other. So then I say, you know how ludicrous that is, but in fact, probably what's happening? That the liver didn't look out for the kidneys and gave it the wrong thing and knows that the kidneys don't like that. So you discover what is a very weird world, a very normal world in yourself. You discover in that element, you are not only you, but you're not really you. There's you and then the management of the you structure. And that, as you explore it, by accident, usually takes you into it, where you reflect on it as to what the hell is happening. Then you also understand what treatment is and what treatment is not. It's not should I or shouldn't I so much. It's that it makes you aware that you're in a process. But as you become aware that you're in a process, you become aware more of your humanity. And becoming aware of your humanity is not just gift giving and doing this, but reaching a place where that's where you're coming from. Because in that, I think that when you're coming from that, you're having a conversation with the mystery. So there will be attractions that come out of that feeling. And each of these attractions have their expression. And that meant that it was instant friendship. And it was sacred. And then one became aware once that was sacred again, however naive it would sound. You then understood a Shiva and a Shakti proclamation of celibacy. That celibacy was a kind of innocence, not reaction or resistance or holding back or whatever. That when you're in love, you make love. And I think that it's pretty close to what's happening anyway. So I would say the processes don't even work unless there is a kind of underlying affection and touch. So then it would seem that if folks came to us, it's about a kind of awakening. about something from the awakening, then there may be perspective of doing. And just in my mind's eye, when we were talking about relationship, we didn't see the other fellow come back, Will Smith or Will Wright, when he was racing towards the airport. But relationship is kind of floating overhead. So it still seems to be another variation of the virus for a period of time where it's just kind of still slow motion. What do you say, Derek? Is it active for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you say virus, but love does sometimes feels like the body has an infection of some kind. Not to resist or get rid of it or anything, but it seems to flood the body with something.
What? But you didn't catch it, did you? Yeah, as far as you know.
No.
Although they are saying that there's later effects of it or whatever. You know. Look, again, you're talking about. Let's go to the medical idea that the immune system is juggling this body, and it listens to what you want, or dream of, or hope for, and it manages that form. So, say you want to go to Las Vegas, the kidneys say to the liver, "Come on, you want to go to Las Vegas? Going to go to Las Vegas." It all jumps on board. So you can see there are times in your life when you're excited about something that the body, everything goes together with it. It's almost like 100% jumping into the story. As the story becomes literalized, then it starts to lose the cooperation that it had in the body. And the management of life then seems to become the predominant form. And that's based on the system that you're in. So you see that you're in a system that the work is a literal form. You get paid for this literal work. And you see that changing radically in people working at home and extrapolating from their own life as their work. So more and more you start to see systems in flux. And you see that at the same time that a normalcy is going on, the situation that you're in is in flux. Now that may bring fear. What are we going to do? And this and that. That's usually built to bring fear, so that you're still bound to the system in some way. But you also see that the flux is also taking away circumstances that are not created. We're not based on feeling or wanting to do it, but are kind of literally. Okay. So circumstance has always done that. Where it then shows you the theater of the situation you're in. So you see a situation that exists and doesn't exist simultaneously. Somehow it doesn't have permanency in it. Everyone within it wishes to have a life. And everyone within it wishes to have, somehow there's something in them that would wish to have their own life. Not repeat the parents or this or that, but just to be in love with them. And so let's say you stumble upon a holy shit aspect of the life where that is real. And if you're in that space, you say it's more real than Trump and this and that. Somehow that's real. Somehow it gets past the story out there, which is literalizing itself around fear. And it's not to say that the structure of it's not happening. But the biggest challenge is our own day-to-day.
Yeah.
And you see as the form that one is in is shifting, it doesn't appreciate its theater as it did. It's only in retrospect that it will say, holy shit, you went through that?
Mm.
You really went through that? And you say, why didn't you say, I had to do that role for the situation to be right. I had to go into the story and make sure that I'm not, that the memory of me is not some shitter that they're bullshitting about.
Mm.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
That somehow there's a hey baby in the story, and somehow that's given everyone a life to some degree. Sometimes that interferes, I guess, with life. What you say, Derek? Do you feel that there was a hey baby in your life? That your mommy was a hey baby for you?
Yeah. Hmm. Reciprocally.
Hey babies. So you want to fly over your own life? It's not so hard, but you see that there's no channels unless a weird question comes your way.
Feels like I'm along for the ride,
Well,
regardless.
as I said, my mother came here to die with Mary, inviting her, and they created this theater. And so then I got to visit a world that I hadn't known growing up. You understand? So then, but there must have been 1,000 other people knowing that she had this in her, just as the same as Michelle. I meet 1,000 other people who know the hip Michelle, this kind of Michelle, and nightclub Michelle, and philosophical, helping you what to do, Michelle. But when I'm faced in the moment with it, I'm faced with Michelle, the person in front of me. So you see that inherently in stretching out the person is the history and the mystery, and yet the mystery is only a mystery to you. Hidden in the mystery was a dimension that would have changed the picture. If you saw there was a life being lived. Or if you find out why was this hurt and this going on in his family, he says, you know, the guy had a tube in his penis when he peed. So imagine yourself with that. So don't take the argument too seriously because it's coming from a guy who feels like he's dying or drowning or something like that. You know? So there's a holy shit moment in simple life where we realize we may have been talking to or interacting with someone who was internally really scared shit about where they were. And so then you see that people are managing a style, a persona, a face, a grace, but it's a theater. And so when you look at each individual life, you see it's more theater management. And theater management is where everyone lives together in the show. But then somehow everyone has to be on board in the same way when you do the show to an audience who looks at it. And yet they're living together, there's arguments, boyfriends, girlfriends. But somehow there's a moment where it coordinates. When you see your life in retrospect as having had those experiences where somehow you saw what was happening from a different perspective and you locate it in time, you see it's still in you. Even though it happened in our time, the brain time is not our literal time here. There's an instantaneousness in the memory. And somehow there's a physical effect in the instantaneousness of the memory. And sometimes it's a sentiment, and sometimes it's a fear of a sentiment. It strikes a hidden chord that's hidden in plain sight. And you see that you are being protected to some degree by elements that won't let you see, that give you a logic of continuity. But you see dimensions of yourself as multifaceted. And so there, once you open it up, there's no longer a fear of the moment from the past meeting you in the moment in the present or in the future. You see the parallel lives being lived and the creativity coming out of that. In the perception, you've changed a little bit of what would be a really tough conversation. What do you say, Urja?
Yes.
What is missing in the story is a wholehearted conversation. And wholehearted means that the separation between the folks is missing. It is something unfold that releases the story. So until that has taken place, survival seems to be the reason for one's life. And in that survival, one has to live in a suppression. But then as you discover the art of your own life, you start to see that you're moving in a different time, where exploring different dimensions of the life is what you're about. That discovery actually, I think, changes the nature of the body and the beings. But then you see, as you live in a literal form, with a literal job, for myself, I see that there's an accident waiting when you fall out of love with it, or you fall not out of love, that's not the, but somehow you understand it's become a kind of slavery. That process starts to happen anyway for you. Or where you lose the feeling for the literal circumstance that you're in. So then the things that you did normally start to feel funky, and that processes are happening and of truth are happening in you all the time. And it's not laid out as literalness and truth, but that there's somehow a journey that you have. And you see somehow in retrospect, you see that there's an energy that was pushing you to an experience. And that you kind of had to be really dumb to have the experience. But then you see it wasn't dumb, there was an experience that somehow the conversation you're having with the mystery. So let's say you fly over and you see another dimension of happening, you return to straight time. But you actually see in your life different variants of the time. And so when you see different variants of the time, you see different variants towards the survival. So you see that there may be a time where it just releases the story that thanks very much, and then there becomes a reason for it, but somehow there's a release. But you see that somehow you're not running from something so drastically, you are having a conversation, second nature to you now. And you can ask it dopey questions about, should I go yet? Okay. And you want to hang around? You want some more time? But it's dopey. But dopey is the kind of temperament you need with an iron down. Not a superior knowledge or this or that, but that somehow the thing that you're asking is with a lover, that they be a lover, that they see the world together, you're sharing something. That's not spelled out what that is, but it is spelled out what it not is. So you see difference in time of Dharma time and Karma time. And sometimes you may see that the love affair was in the memory. Or you see that the memory is happening in the moment. And you're seeing it from a different place in yourself. And you turn the screw so it's not naive and completely naive, but at the same time, it's based on some kind of poetic truthness or something. And you can feel that there's a kind of health related to a friendship. And at time changes in relationship to that, it's more desire. Because desire is also something that the body understands to some degree. It has to cooperate. So I feel that as you have certain experiences personally, the body is also having those experiences with you, and there is a conversation going on. And it can be as dumb as, hey, is it time to split? Or do you want to hang out? It can be dumb as that, but that's not dumb. That's remarkable conversation. It's not around doing and don't doing. It's more around seeing. There's an agreement that you have with yourself that you won't do a sneaky thing on it. That if you do anything, that somehow you have to have a conversation with yourself a little bit, whether it, is that okay? Or does that sound too corny? Can one have conversations with the circumstance that they're in? Not always a literalization of the circumstance, but that basically is a fresh look from a different place. And it's not the sense of ownership or whatever, and it's not even, we'll say the life is not even medical help, and it's organized around the medical idea of you, and that's only part of it. But you see that they're owning it as medical stuff. And you see that you come into a situation where you can see what is the right thing, but you also understand you would get arrested if you did the right thing in some way. If you help someone die, and they say, well, it's okay, I'd like to go now, or whatever, and you were just there for them, they may charge you with something. And you were supposed to grab the person, save them, and say, no, I don't want it, man, it's okay, it's cool. But you see that automatically, if they come into the house, they have to save your life, which is really sometimes pretty weird if they're pumping you and bumping you up. Let me see it. Maybe an interesting experience. What do you think? Should I have an experience like that, Kai? Let them come in and then like pump me up and like that. And I said, no, that's okay.
No, I don't like that.
You're tickling me. Stop. You're tickling me. So, okay, we're goners then, because it would be too dumb looking and sounding. You say, okay, man, you don't have to do it. If it comes back, it comes back. If it doesn't, it's cool. I say, you cannot have a perspective like that. I say, I'm just putting it in words for you. If you want it in scientific terms, I can give you a scientific term for, if you want to hang out, you can. If you don't feel like hanging out, you can go. I can give you a scientific version of that, if you like, or even a melodic version of that, or a historical version of that, but that has always been available to humanity. And that because going is inherently in living. And one experiences the processes of the journey. And the processes of the journey is that somehow, even though it's remarkably different, you're the same person that was. But not same and same, and same and somehow that's you in there. So when you do see a photograph of 40 years ago of you in there, and then you here, and so the there and the here, you start just to get glimpses of time from a different place, time and space. being more memory than literal. Is that you said the fellow wanted to come on? Did anyone come on at all? Okay, you were mentioning.
Oh, my friend?
yeah.
No, he was possibly going to come on when he's visiting, but I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. He's not here yet.
Well, it would seem to me then that you're in the midst of an energy field like that, and that somehow, historically, you've been able to ward off and still keep a friendship, but ward off when the attraction wasn't literally that it was more helper or looking out for or chum or friend or whatever, but that, and somehow, even though it may not have been said literally, get the hell out of here, Buster, it's somehow experienced as where it's at, where you're kind of looking out for the person. But the shared intimacy is again like the virginity of a circumstance. Each time that you may have been in one or other situation, there was a feeling that you had that allowed you to go into it. And yet you see then that there's an attraction for you, but it's the attraction of a kind of friendship that's unusual. Because it's a friendship around the journey. Not so literally what to do and what you shouldn't do, but around the journey. And you see that everyone you know around the journey has their own expressions.
Yes.
So there is something that the journey itself gives birth to. Even the normal lives of these people are not exactly normal. They're their own creations. And what it does reflect where they're at in a large degree. What is actually happening. So you still into it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as all that goes, it seems that I was very capable of being intimate with anyone, and not anyone, but if the attraction was there. But now I really I'm just waiting for that one. If that one exists, if that one doesn't exist, as much as I want that, it can't.
No, it'll say to you, thanks very much, Kai. We don't need you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're figuring it out. So we understand there's two worlds going on. And in the one world, you're a virgin. And in the other world, you say, hey, baby, how you doing? So you have to do things. But secretly, you're only able to look like you're a regular person out there because you're a virgin here. So now the virgin and the, hey, baby, how you doing, woman, walking down the street together as one person.
Mm-hmm.
So then you see that you've always had situations where this guy can create a real relationship immediately and get down with it and create realities. But then this guy pops up in the story. So you have been balancing a feeling which has created an attraction with you. But once it literalizes as a thing, so the attraction was to this in you. So then I would say that after being that way with you, the dreaming of you, the thinking of you becomes the reality.
Yeah.
And then when the thinking of you becomes the reality where you are no longer you, but my thoughts of you. Okay.
Yes.
There's two elements in it. There's poetry to some extent, and there's madness to the other extent. So can you enter into the story and say, hey, Buster, no one owns this sweet thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's not ownable that way. So you know that I care and you know that I'm okay and I'll do this and that. but no trip this phase. I've got some kids I'm trying to do the right thing by. We're up in the air. I may or may not have a literal love. So there is a kind of magical thinking, dumb thinking, crazy thinking, illegal thinking in this bubble I'm in. Which once snaps, somehow it shifts. And yet it's an ordeal to go through the literalness of it. But it is yours somehow without it being laid on you. A creation that somehow you've put in motion, that there is somehow waiting in a tree and just not just waiting, watching you, going through the story. And they're laughing their ass off. They're saying, look, she's in Pennsylvania. A couple of kids in Pennsylvania. And they're just sitting on the branch, so they're watching the movie of you. And they say, I love that car. I love what she's going to do next. See if she figures this one out. So let's say love is looking at you. And sometimes it's laughing its ass off at the moves that you're making or the trips that you're doing. But somehow, when it's laughing, it's not because of what, it's because there is a love for you somehow. And that is waiting in that journey for you. Now, does it have a shape or form or this or that? It may manifest as a shape or form, may pop into the story and goof with you or whatever, but it does seem to me that it's not a literalness that matters so much. It's a kind of true to that feeling sentiment that's there. That somehow this phase of the life has purity, and pure doesn't mean sneaky or holy or anything. It means pure. That somehow there's an experience that needs purity to have the full experience. And you see that purity doesn't mean always that the people didn't do this or didn't do that. It's that there's a really no bullshit scene happening, it's coming from a different place. So yeah, I think that what form or shape it takes, if it takes a form, another person or whatever, if you discover your own body as your lover, or however many Meshuggah approaches you can take, I think that you're not going to leave this place until that happens for you. Do you want the job? Or do you want to get it? You want to find some work in Kmart?
No, thanks.
Well, I hear people have a lot of fun in Kmart. Do you want a job in Kmart, or there's an opening here?
Our Kmart closed. Our Kmart's still open somewhere?
No, our Kmart is closed also. Okay, so that was very weird conversation. Has anyone else been on this or just us? Do you see anyone at all?
John and Britt have said hi. If anybody else wants to say hi on YouTube.
It's okay. Would I hear it if anyone wanted to say something? Would the voice come through or?
No, not unless we gave them the Zoom link.
Oh, I see.
YouTube is separate. I mean, I stream it to YouTube from Zoom, but you can look at the comments. If you were able to get on YouTube, you would be able to read the comments. Jimmy Diaz said hi. He's on YouTube. He's watching on YouTube.
Okay. How you doing out there? I'm kind of liking the easiness of the form, kind of at the same time that we're sort of schmoozing as friends and our life is kind of waiting a few hours away, but what we're exploring is the feelings that ran through it and the experience. There's a stream of consciousness in it that is also showing me other aspects of the story myself too. But, so how does shall we carry on with this expression? What do you think? Or is it, what's your thoughts? I wouldn't mind, but that would be based also on your feeling, Kai, to carry it on.
Oh, my feeling is to carry it on. I mean, I'm just going with the flow and whatever feels good to you. I love the idea of having this collection of you talking.
Well, it is pretty. It's employed both a kind of creativity and everydayness. And
so, Will said hi, and also John said, "What is filling your heart presently?"
What is filling my heart presently?
Yeah, that's the question.
Well, when you're seeing it from the perspective of, I would say, death as the mirror, the other side of the mirror, looking out into the literal world, then you're seeing the things of you see the journey of the heart from a different place. So you see that it's moving in relationship to absence, to presence. So even the absence is somewhat filling you in a way, in its absence. And it is also remarkable when relationships can transcend dying and still be relationships and still have conversations with whom and with what. And so we enter a world where the whom and with what is not literally how it's defined anymore. So then you understand that the heart was talking to the mystery through the history. And there were experiences in the history when you acted on it, when you said, hey, baby, and you got married and you literally did this, that there was somehow inherently waiting a broken heart. Now, the broken heart may be a medium that you have to overcome and it's psychological, but in fact, in the creative journey or the spiritual journey, the broken heart is the medium to a true love. You see that the me is only an aspect of this life. You become aware of the energies that have run through your life. And as you become aware of them, you start to see the journey as sacred. When you see it as sacred, then your question is sacred. So then the heart doesn't own the story, the liver doesn't own the story, it is a cooperative. And it is asking itself whether it's still into it. And there are moments when there are hey baby conversations that are very deep mantra, because you see all of the world, all of the life is missing a heartfelt conversation, genuine heartfelt conversation. And you see no matter how one would try to get to that, how it's the avoidance of that heartfelt conversation that you then run into in the story. The very thing that is being sought, a kind of oneness, is resisted in the story. So you see, as you get to ground zero, the differences become the reality. But seen from above, you see the similarities running through the story. Whenever you see something that's hidden in plain sight, it becomes sacred in your perception. Is that okay as an answer? That sounds pretty liberal, that you start to see heart not from the commercialization of heart, but you see somehow a mother who cared for you, unbeknownst to you in a way, going through some hard times in her life, but hidden from you. And somehow you see that the heart is not the literalness, it's a part of the story that was hidden in plain sight that you took for normal, that someone cared for you, and that there was an I and thou already happening in your life. So somehow we perceive it in its loss. Or I describe it in reading a diary and discovering a woman instead of the person who's your mother. And you see that being a mother blocked you from the very experience that others may have had with her. So when you see the whole picture, you see that you come more from a mystery than a history. But always, without that perception, the history is always attempting to intrude as you. But somehow within some of us, there is an instinctive mystery also running through life. We try to give it a name, we've tried to incorporate it, we've tried to do everything we can. But it seems that to one extent, the other side of the mirror is looking at us. And that seems you in Dharma time, how it is unfolding and experiencing. But the one who is trying to co-opt the heart is literalizing it as the medium of self. But the heart has a yearning, I would say, of its own, and it has having a conversation with the mystery. I hope that's okay. And maybe I'll say,
He said, yes, Danny, I found these talks very rewarding lately. Thank you.
yeah, I'm also discovering that because it looks like I'm a very normal seeing, but as I look around, it's becoming increasingly magical and weird. And now my foot floating up like that. We'll see. It's become weirder yet within that, but okay. How are you, Arjun? You're okay, actually? Okay, meaning that you can manage it?
Yes, yes, it's a lot of aloneness.
Then it must be a lot of eating also.
Eating in movies.
So you're telling me that the God energy sent you here to eat? It made you lonely enough because it wanted some pizza? Mm-hmm. So what happens when you walk down lonely street? Let's say your hands in your pocket, whistling a song, and you walk down lonely street. Do you see lonely around you?
Yes.
And the aloneness is that your ass hurts and you're alone with it. Your neck hurts and that you're alone with it. It would be so nice to have a sweetheart with the neck
Yes.
saying, how's your feet doing, baby? So I don't even know if the feet planned it on me. You know, the feet may plan, let's get married to oil us and put hot water on it. So are the feet planning like little kids? What do you think? Is it too dumb?
No, I don't know.
So let's say I don't know either, but it seems pretty weird. But it also seems pretty beautiful simultaneously at times. You know? And so let's say, is there something still hanging around for someone who naturally just touch your neck? Your daughter would naturally, if she's in town, would naturally just touch your neck, wouldn't she? If it was her. But then
Yeah.
she may lay on you too many exercises or something. So let's say the neck is looking for a lover. Because it would have to be a true love if they want to get an old lady with a bad neck.
Right.
Okay. So somehow it has to happen accidentally. They have to see something soulful in you. So somehow there is we'll call it integrity happening in your life, or genuineness happening in your life. And somehow it has to come accidentally, as it has come accidentally, where the ego doesn't dominate it. And let's say as it suffers the literalization, where the relationship becomes a possessive and literalizes what you have to do, that inherently there's something waiting that's going to shift the plane instantly. That would take 20 years to negotiate out of one movement. Is brilliant. One movement, and all of a sudden the plane of the story has shifted. So then there's you, the persona, and there's you, the story that you've navigated. And you see that the time in it is very different than literal time. But you also understood, as an actor, your neck would still hurt, and your back would still hurt. That somehow the hurt is in the picture.
Yes.
So into it doesn't mean literal signing a letter of being into it, but more seeing in fact that there is an evocative aspect of the life that you've been living. It may materialize again if there's another invitation. So it does seem it's up in the air.
Yes.
Every aspect of it seems to be up in the air. You don't need to be rich because somehow you're being looked out for. So, and it's giving you a civilized situation to be Buddhist or be an Indian or whatever. But somehow you're doing Urja. And somehow there's a consciousness of the story of Urja, that you're caring for this old lady Urja.
Yes.
So then it's the caretaker who is looking at you as Urja. And she doesn't lie to herself. She helps you because it needs this or it needs that. So somehow seeing the life from the helper's perspective, and the helper who loves you as yourself. You see how you may employ magical thinking or this or that, or you may have to be logical about what's happening. But you see that somehow you're choosing to live. And it's not exactly choosing like choice that you're making, like a social security number with it. But
Yes.
that's how the life is a creative act, where it appears to be a literal act. You see that almost 90% of it has been a creative act. And in the seeing, I think that time shifts for you. And I do feel that in creative time, one can ask for 5 more years or to do this project or to, because in that space, it doesn't mean literally it has to obey you, but you see that time is in flux. So then I'll have a dumb thing of saying, well, I'll buy another year. With the situation creatively, it seems that that's in it. And it's not literally a year. It's a kind of continuing something that we're doing or sharing or seeing where it goes. Is that okay, Derek? Are you still into your part of it there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an aspect of seeing things through that has just sort of presented itself to me.
Well, let's say you'll have the confusion of coming from turning it into a job, a literalization, which is not, and then I'm going to try not to do it. So you see that guy, there's just something that's happening that's becoming part of you. And somehow, it's not a how-to energy. How do I do this? It's a kind of second nature to you now. Where you're kind of coming from that place. And so I do feel that when you are having that dialogue with yourself, that you're coming from that place, you start to see the attractions that have created the circumstance that you're in the first place. You become aware of elements that were there in the past or whatever, but perceived now, you see elements of what really happened. And they would say that what really happened was this literalness or not. And I say, no, what really happened was more almost music that was made. If you describe what went down, there's a remarkable musical you can make out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we go then? I've been shifting to I saw a little snapshot of what to eat when diet. and it was commercialized on PBS, but they did convey something that from their perspective, a very light diet should be happening in the supper time. And that before that, the major of your diet should be around 3 o'clock. Finish with your diet around 3 o'clock. So we shifted a little bit. And then they can say that you can have dinner for breakfast. So I just had soup with noodles, Japanese soup with noodles, and for breakfast this morning. And it was okay. And then we had, well, because we have leftovers, I say, let me plan the leftovers into the breakfast. So I've had pizza a few days, and then the spaghetti. That was pretty good. And Rafi was here, and he had spaghetti for breakfast. And so we're playing it around. It can't be weird what to cook and when, and so on. But I've been doing that, and but I did then feel to finish eating around 5-ish with a lighter diet, a salad or a soup or something like that, and then have the majority of the food. So I'm having the avocado earlier, and so it's very interesting, this juggling of the food. Maybe that's why my foot got so swollen. It wants food. Well, I got so concerned because I had been on the case of Janet to make this cake that she was making, and I was eating 2 slices, one in the day and one in the nighttime. So then I said, "Holy shit! Look at that belly!" And I got a belly in about a week and a half
from the cake.
But I was eating that cake, and the cake looked like my belly.
Oh.
So I said, "Okay, I'll have it every now and then." It was the greatest cake. Everyone who ate it loved it. Gingerbread, and but so I saw that my body was responding very quickly to this or that. If I was doing this or that, I'm still basically doing the clubs and then the vibration machine, and maybe the bike in the room. I haven't walked much. It's been so hot. Are you getting out there, Derek?
Yeah. Sometimes the feeling just isn't there. Maybe I'm preoccupied. The past couple of days have been that way. But then I've sort of built it into my week that I have to ride my bike a good amount of distance, and I definitely get the Jivan Tapa in most mornings, and the Indian clubs most mornings. So.
The Jivan Tattva is also Feldenkrais movements.
Yeah, all of it seems to be very relaxed.
Yeah.
I haven't done that one at all, but the one where you.
Maybe we'll take another one of those clubs in the shadow and stuff like that and see. It'll be interesting for me to see it because, as I say, the shadow kind of added a whole different thing where it was no longer an exercise or any of that, but it was just this, you kind of impressed the shadow. You made moves to impress the shadow in some weird way. You'll see if you do something. All of it comes to you, It's so, once you engage, and it becomes second nature. But I am talking about some incident awakens certain kind of tendencies that are there in your body already, that when you were a kid, or if you played baseball or softball, or you did this, or you, all of a sudden it comes back to you it's not exactly an exercise, it's easy to do. Okay, so I'm talking about discovering kind of latent situations that in time, that somehow the body has different version of time happening within itself. And there are discoveries that the brain, there are aspects of the memory that doesn't have time in it. So when you get close to the experience, a similar body response happens. Because it's already there in you. But then for me, it's not only finding that happening and playing it up. But there's a discovery of your own life. When you discover that there's been a trauma in there, that you discover years later, similar experience, and it sends you to that place. So you see it on the screen and it sends you immediately to that place. And you see your body reacting to it or whatever. The idea is to get out of it, but holy shit, who the hell knew that this was still hanging out in me? And so what a remarkable system it is. It's still protecting you in some way. But they're making it like an enemy, but it's still protecting you from getting hurt or something. So then you see the PTSD is not stupid. It has a almost as if an angel is looking out for you. It's protecting some element from being captured in the story that you're in. Because there is a soul-searching element that happens at some time in the story. And you see the resistance to soul-searching allows people the race to do shit that it will be very ashamed of in time. But thinks it has to do it now and fights for it and will do all that. And there will be a moment that will feel like shit for throwing away its soul, throwing away its humanity. But at that point in time in the discovery frees the story, not literally like an air balloon. But somehow you enter into life from a different place. So I guess they would call that born again.
Call it
It's
what?
that then born again in some way.
Oh,
You see then you see your history as your mystery. You're no longer dominated by your history. You see then the history that you came from is more magical weirdness, a crazy quilt of experiences that you were kept out of seeing how remarkable it was. And remarkable not because it was owned or special or anything like that. It doesn't have any of those kind of literal traits. But when you see it, you're touched. And you're not so much touched by anything. But being touched is the next dimension of seeing into the story that you lived. And that some of us who are exploring this avenue of being touched, we created an attraction where there's a desire to have that experience, but you see the whole resistance of continuity to being touched. So you saw one can claim racial the ideas and one can claim this and fight over them or whatever. But in a friendship of falling in love, you can be touched. And somehow being touched forgives the story. So you see somehow the energy is laughing at us in plain sight. Okay, I'll see you later.
thank you, Danny. Again.
Oh, you got the club there.
Ah,
Yeah. Eric,
You
help
got
me.
one?
Now I need the video of how to use them. I mean, I can improvise, but
You have two of them?
yes, two.
Why don't you send that to her, Derek?
I can do that. I'd have to find it. There may be a YouTube video too that I can find, or we could even do. I could show you some moves. We could get on Zoom and.
Oh, no, yeah, those
Sure,
moves
if I
are
have
out there.
a name, a
Those
title,
moves are out there, but for
Mhm.
Ursha, who's kind of in our situation, the idea of looking and smelling and hearing while you're doing it, and kind of loosening the body, being very relaxed body in it, and then adding the shadow to it. I'd love you to add the shadow to it. So it is still kind of our thing in some way, even though I did see some nice moves out there from Greek guys doing this and huffing and puffing and wrestlers and all that. But then there's an old guy who twirls. And I saw when Seth came here the other day, he got the two light ones and he was twirling them, as part of a regular makeup. So it does come to you. And it is nice to see. But if you have that film, then why not? We'll make another one, but why not send that one to Ursha? So
I can do that.
there's a couple of basic moves in that. Yeah, there's a couple of basic moves in that that kind of release the body. I hope it comes across. I don't know if it does, but we'll make something.
I think it does.
Why do you want to open? You want to open up a club store then, Derek,
No,
and do workouts there in San Francisco? No,
no,
you don't think so? Singing lessons and some of these movements together.
it's part of the package deal. 30 minute,
Whole
30
package,
minute.
you just invite people to take a 20-minute break. And there's some clubs if they want to buy it. Although you could add mace. Why don't you get one of these mace and
I-
see how that is? There's
Yeah,
one
you-
said that
You brought
You
that
go
up
like
last time. I took a look. Actually, it looks pretty interesting to see some of the.
most of them do a military or a wrestling, but I've been using a mace club on the vibration machine. Where I lift with the body very loose with it or whatever. But the mace club like that, somehow keeping this moving, and then you can dance with it or whatever. But as I say, adding the shadow to it gave it a whole different thing. Or added another dimension to it, where you saw as if an observer was seeing you. Or someone looking out the window, how they were seeing you against the scape of the situation where you're individually in it. You're part of this whole that another person would see. So then what's hidden, and that's why I'm saying I'm doing the eye and smelling exercises and hearing exercises. The body is doing that anyway. If it hears a plane, then it looks for the plane normally. So I'm just illuminating what is happening normally. And then when I saw that these people in the New York Times again the other day with the sense of smell lost, that it was 27% of their being, or whatever, lost, or their imagination was lost when they lost the smell. So I'm just keeping it easy going like that with that form of exercise. But so we took a pretty quick picture of it, but I did feel that it wasn't completely full with the shadow aspect of it, which people may discover different things once they're doing it. They may discover dance out of it. And also, what's her name? The ballet star friend of ours, Laurel. Laurel had a baby, I think, 2 days ago, and her second child. Remember
Another
Laurel,
one.
the
Oh,
dancer? Yeah, another young. Yeah, so she seems absolutely. I think they're in Vermont, and I don't know if the fellow that she married is a dancer, also or a musician or whatever, but she seems to be grooving with it. So good luck, Laurel. Let's see how it goes.
yes.
Yeah, no, it's interesting the lives that people who've spent time here and then went out and made a life for themselves, the absolutely different forms that it took, and everyone did themselves. And there are some aspects of it where in the meeting, again, there's something that kind of has to be seen to release the story. But the story has given each person in some way a life. But it's also made out of nothing. That people then are surviving out of nothing. Their job is nothingness. It's to stay at home. So we're free to move. You're free to move. You're free to go downstairs. You're free to live. So somehow it's a dynamic that's taken as normal. So then there are other challenges that happen when you're free at home, and that is a pain in the neck sometimes. While others are working or tilling the soil or something, doing something like that. So does that allow you some kind of creative juice there, Derek?
So
The doer is hard then. Is it for you?
yeah. Any overt doing is, I find, but then when there's a natural doing, it seems that's still difficult, but it almost seems obvious in a way.
What seems obvious? Do you think that you can go into a club and do a stand-up routine?
Not very well at first, anyways.
Well, but not very well is the best kind of standard routine.
Maybe that's true.
There was one old guy, what's his name there? He forgot his notes in his pocket. He spent the first 10 minutes searching his clothes for his notes. And then he says, and then all of a sudden he says, China. He just says the word China, and Professor Irwin Corey, I think it was. And then there was another guy who would yell at people. He would yell at even when he went on the Letterman show and all that. What's his name? That guy, that old Russian guy.
Oh,
So there was Professor Irwin Corey was a sweetheart guy, but he would forget his lines. It was part of his jokes.
On purpose. I mean, it was a part of the act.
Purposely forget his lines as part of a joke, as part of everyone's laughing the whole time while he's looking for him. Then he finds it. So let's say, how would you approach it, Derek?
That seems an effective way. Maybe to slip into a accidental thought piece, maybe.
Well, if you see creatively, accident is a remarkably creative thing to do, because you then have to get the cooperation of so many of them within the picture. Make it look like an accident. Now, even hoodlums used to say something like that, make it look like an accident. You know what I mean? But in the movies, make it look like an accident. Or in the theater, making it look like an accident. You know how hard it is to make it look like an accident? The accident doesn't seem that hard, but to make it look like an accident seems hard. And I say, well, you're bringing motive to an accident where it wasn't there before. So the accident that you have, you may say, man, I should have fixed the floor or something. Yeah. So it allows you to see something in time or whatever. But making it look like an accident is really hard to do, because then you're talking about an audience looking at it. And they experience it as an accident, even though they know it's not. It is so convincing that it's an accident. And so you start to see a creative or a parallel situation happening as the normal in life. That somehow one is maintaining a persona in their life, in their existence. And the naturalization of it is there until something happens that shows you somehow the partnership of you and you. That you're doing something that's happening naturally, but in retrospect, it'll be perceived from a different place. So there are times where you have access to the story that you've lived. And you see it's more of a journey than it is living a story. That you're having certain experiences. And that they're still unfolding. And that somehow the major portion of the life is a creative act, not a literal one. Survival doesn't mean literal survival. It means a juggling act, a creative juggling act. And it only comes out of affection. So then you may meet an immune system that says affectionately, how are you doing with the vaccination? So then you meet it, and you then have an affectionate thing that you're sharing together. That meeting is there for you, Derek. It's in the form where the normalization of it happens. You get the feelings of it, but the normalization of the everyday in certain time from another perspective, one can have a peep of the moment. And that's what we were calling about the vision, clear vision, where somehow you're seeing it from the dream state, but not literally a dream state. You have still logic in the story, but you see there is a kind of creative dream in the story also. The only thing is that when one has a dream, it's usually privatized. But when it's about a journey together or whatever, then it's not privatized. It is an agreement, shared. I'll explore that a little bit myself. Okay, I'll let you go then, and hope
Thank you,
maybe I'll
Danny.
see you on something.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Thanks, Danny.
Okay, Irisha, take care of yourself.
Thank you, Dan. You too. I hope your food gets better.
Yeah, let's see what happens there. It's pretty weird.
Does it hurt? Oh, it's frozen.
I don't know if he signed off.
Maybe he checked up.
You think so?
Maybe. I'll see you guys.
Okay.